this week that we would be talking about doubt and faith. We're talking about questions. I wonder how many of us here today have questions about God, about our faith, about Jesus, about religion. Well, I sometimes think that it's important how we talk about doubt, because doubt can mean many different things. Doubt can mean unbelief, there's no doubt about it. But doubt can also mean I have questions even in the midst of my faith. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that as Christian people, we don't have all the answers. We weren't meant to. If we were meant to have all the answers, our Bible would look very different. It would read very different. Jesus himself even spoke in parables, in riddles, so that only those who were destined to know would know. In fact, our scriptures today talk about how kings and prophets longed to understand these things. So, is faith the absence of questions? Absolutely not. In fact, I stand here today with someone with probably more questions than anyone I know, because that's how God designed me. My first degree was a science degree, and my pursuit of science led me to God because I had so many questions. Questions are healthy because questions are actually the search for truth. The search for knowledge is to have questions. And so I think all of us have questions. And in fact, my biggest criticism is of people who don't have questions. Because perhaps the most important questions in life are, why am I here? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? What's the point? They're important questions. And they're really good questions. And if we're not asking those questions, then we're not living. We're existing. And they're two very different things. So let's start from that place. It's good to have questions. And it's good to have questions of God. Because it was my questions of God that led me to Jesus. Because people start with, is there a God? That's a question. But for Christians, we start with, who is God? Not is there a God, who is God? Because you only have to open your eyes and walk out the door to know there is a God. Now people say, that's fine, you're one of those Christian people, it just as easy for you. But I'm a man of science, I know all these things. Well, you've got to have more faith to believe there's no God than to believe there is a God. The oceans, where do they come from? There's a good question. You ask an evolutionary biologist where the oceans come from. You ask a geologist where the oceans come from. We don't know. We can't explain it. Our best theory is a whole bunch of meteors crashed into the earth at some point that were covered in ice. And it melted and turned into our oceans. Really? That's a good theory. But it's just that. I could go on all day like this. The truth is this. We don't have all the answers. But we do have a choice. We have a choice. Either I am going to look at my world cynically, and I'm so determined that there is no God that I will refuse to see the evidence that is all around me. Or I can choose to believe that there is a God and see the evidence and recognise it for what it is. Very dry, I know. It's a very philosophical position. But I'll give you an example, a bit like Michelle did with the kids. I did a triathlon recently. Yes, I've been looking for another excuse to talk about. Now, when I did my triathlon, how many people do you think questioned that I did my triathlon? Well, mostly the men did. They took one look at my stomach and said, whatever. Some of them, I said, oh, I've got photos to prove it. And you can doctor photos. Some of them got online and went to the website and looked up to see if my name was there. Some of them even there said, oh, that can be doctored too. You know, the truth is, most of you here on Sunday didn't see me finish, so you've got no reason to believe me. What reason would I have to lie about it? What reason would I have to make it up? Do you know there's two sides to the coin? That's the point I'm trying to make. How we approach the question is as important as the answer. It's not, is there a God? Because if we choose to believe there's a God, then there is. It's, who is God? That's the real question. Who is God? And what is God doing? What does God want from us? Who are we to God? What is our role in all of this? Why are we here? Why did God make us? Can you see that the questions that come from accepting there's a God are very different and very important questions? And the questions actually give us a cause to discover what it's all about. I want to open our Bibles now, and we're going to actually turn to this encounter that Jesus has with Thomas. So, John chapter 20. And we'll pick it up at verse 25. John chapter 20, verse 25, page 1075. Now, can I say, I'm not giving Thomas, I love Thomas. I'm so grateful for Thomas for doing this, because this was me. I love Thomas. And so we see Thomas here, okay, so, verse 24, sorry. Now, Thomas called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We've seen the Lord." Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and my hand in his side, I will not believe." Now here's a bit the name I picked up on, verse 26. A week later. So Thomas has hanging around with all his best mates who were going on about this risen Lord. Hey, we saw Jesus, woo, awesome, you know. For a week, he's there going, they're nuts. All my friends have gone insane. They've abandoned everything we worked for to follow some fanciful notion. Not for me, I'm not going to believe. I've got science. I've got facts. And if I don't get proof that Jesus is risen, I am not going to believe. I'm sorry, I'm a man of facts. I'm a man of science. This is me. Let's see what Jesus' response is. Verse 26. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." All right, Thomas responds, "My Lord and my God." Well, you would, wouldn't you? If you got to see a guy who you'd seen dead on a cross, buried, and then you got to put your hands in his side and feel the nails in his hands, you'd believe, wouldn't you? I wouldn't. Because what have I got? Proof. Evidence. And I can tell you, as a science vitamin, I believe too. But here's where it gets really interesting. Verse 29. Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." The reality is, how many of us have put our fingers in Jesus' side and in his hands? I haven't. Not many have. Jesus makes it clear that there is a greater blessing to be had than what Thomas got. Thomas got proof, but there is a greater blessing to be given to those who believe, even without seeing. I want to flip back up the page a little bit. We want to go to chapter 20, verse 21. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit." Do you know, Thomas wasn't there for that. But Jesus breathed on them. What do you think happens when God breathes on us? Belief happens. When God breathes on us, belief happens. Because we haven't seen Jesus and put our fingers in his side. But when God breathes on us, we believe. Do you know, as a 19-year-old, in the second year in my university studies of science a man of facts, a man needing proof. The more questions I asked, the less answers I got. And it was at that point that God breathed on me. And suddenly I realised that it wasn't about facts and proof, that it wasn't being about being able to tangibly grasp God in a way that I felt God should be. Because this is what I did, and this is what a lot of us do. We create God in our own image. I hope you like my choice of words there, because God created us in His image. But we create God in our image. God looks how we want Him to look. Oh, well, if there's a God of love, this is how we do it. Oh, if there's a God, there would be a war. If God were the way He should be, everyone would go to heaven. God would do it my way. So we create God in our own image. And can I tell you, we live in a generation that has created its own God in its own image. And if you doubt me, have a conversation with someone. Ask them, do you believe God? If they say yes, ask them to tell you about their God. They'll tell you about their God. If they say they don't believe in God, well, that's a whole other conversation. But if they do have a God, often they'll say, He's a universal being. I don't understand Him, I don't know Him, but I know He's in everything. He's in the trees, He's this universal being. Okay, and that's all true. But that's not how we know God. Remember I started with the question, who is God? The Christian people, Jesus is God. That's how we know God, in Jesus. Okay, I want to open our Bibles again, and we're going to turn this time to the book of James. There's something for the page number they can call it out for me. I'm looking for James. I'm looking for chapter 1, verse 5.
1196.
1196, thank you. 1196. James chapter 1, verse 5. Okay, verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded man and unstable in all he does. You see, if we make our own God, and we make God in our own image, then in James' thinking, we're like someone just hanging around in the ocean, washed around by the waves. Because here comes the latest theory, here comes the wave, whoosh. And so we go that way. Oh, God must be this. And then another wave comes 10 years later, God must be this. And our beliefs are as if we're in the ocean, washed by the waves. James says instead, ask God for wisdom. Seek God to know who He is. And then we will start to discover. And of course, James says, stop doubting and believe. So who is Jesus? Who is God as we know Him? Right, this time I want us to now turn to John chapter 5, verse 39. John chapter 5, verse 39. You can call out page number if you've got it. 1055. 1055, thank you. And this is Jesus speaking now. Chapter 5, verse 39. Jesus says to them, he's speaking to the Jews, you diligently study the Scriptures, but you think that by them you possess eternal life. These are the Scriptures that testify about me. Yet you refuse to come to me to have life. I do not accept the praise from men, but I know you. I know that you do not have the love of God in your hearts. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me. But if someone else comes in his own name, you will accept him. How can you believe if you accept praise from one another, yet make no effort to obtain the praise that comes from the only God. But do not think that I will accuse you before the Father. Your accuser is Moses, on whom you set your hopes. If you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But since you do not believe what he wrote, how are you going to believe what I say? You see, Jesus makes it very clear that if we go searching for God, whether it be in this book, whether it be in any other religious text, of any other modern popular ideas today, we will find ideas that will appeal to us because we make God in our own image. But if we want to know the truth of who God is, we will find it in one place. And that is belief in Jesus Christ. Because he was God, made human, came to earth. And yet he says we're itching to believe everything but that. We as human beings will believe everything but that. That God made himself human in Jesus Christ and taught us about God, who God is, and importantly taught us why we're here. He taught us what our life is about. He taught us how to know God and made God available to us. He restored friendship between us and God. So, like Thomas, we have a choice to make. Thomas chose not to believe until he had proof, evidence, facts. But the great majority of the world's millions of Christians haven't had that proof. Instead, they've allowed God to breathe on them. They've asked God to breathe on them. And they've found God in the person of Jesus Christ. And they've stopped doubting. And they've believed. Amen. Our studies are written by pastors and teachers actively growing their local church. These studies have been a blessing to churches across many denominations and around Australia. These 7-week practical studies are designed to meet people in their everyday lives and encourage them to grow in faith. Our prayer is that you or your church will be blessed by growing in relationship with our God through studying His Word. You can purchase these studies individually or for groups online.